IDDE, Module 2. Module 2 steps you through the required elements of an IDDE, Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination program.
So an IDDE program, the goal of it is to systematically find and remove illicit discharges. And you want to implement procedures to prevent illicit discharges in the future. An IDDE program must be a written document. The Central Massachusetts Stormwater Coalition developed a sample template for the IDDE program, and it's available on their website. So here are the major components of an IDDE program. First, you need to have a legal authority to prohibit illicit discharges, and this was a requirement from the 2003 permit, so hopefully you all have that in place and are implementing it. Stormwater system mapping is definitely a key portion of your program that will help you to implement your program. And that was also a requirement in 2003, but they've expanded the requirements significantly for the 2016 permit. You will need to have a component to inventory and rank outfalls, dry weather outfall screening, and catchment investigations. Both those two, the dry weather screening and catchment investigations, required written procedures for those components in your plan. And then identification and confirmation of illicit sources and how you'll remove illicit discharges, and then follow-up screening and employee training.
The EPA developed this timeline, which helps to illustrate when the different components of the IDDE program need to be implemented. The timeline starts from the effective or implementation date of the permit.
So just to review legal authority, it will be by an ordinance or a bylaw, and you need the adequate authority so that you can prohibit and investigate illicit discharges, eliminate them, and then implement procedures and actions.
The written program, an SSO, Sanitary Sewer Overflow Inventory, is due by the end of year 1. An ordinance must be in place for any new permittees by the end of year 3.
So an IDDE program is really an interdepartmental process. It is not just one department that's implementing this program. And in your plan, you need to clearly state who will be the responsible party for the IDDE program and all the supporting parties to it, and kind of who has responsibility over what portion of the program. So you can have various departments, including public works and the highway sewer departments, the code enforcement, health department, conservation, the selectmen and town council could be a part of it, town administrator and mayor. It runs the whole line. It's really, truly an interdepartmental program. So stormwater system mapping, the phase 1 mapping is an update of your 2003 mapping. You need to show all your outfalls and receiving waters, but you also need to make sure you show your conveyances, your open channel conveyances like swales and ditches. Don't forget that the ditches can create outfalls. If you have ditched on either side of a roadway, ditches on either side, and they're running down towards, you have a stream crossing, where that ditch line enters the water, that's considered an outfall. So just make sure you keep that in mind. The ditches were kind of overlooked in the 2003 permit. And then interconnections with other stormwater sewer systems need to be mapped. And all your stormwater structures and treatment structures, water bodies, both their name and their impairment, and then your initial catchment delineations. So for each outfall, you'll have to delineate the area that is draining to it.
You can use topography as a first step for delineating catchment areas, and then refine the delineations based on the mapped storm sewer system.
So for phase 1 has to be implemented within 2 years of the effective date of the permit. And then this additional mapping, the phase 2 mapping, you have 10 years from the effective date. So you'll need to include outfall spatial location. In addition to just the manholes and the catch basins, the pipes connecting the structures. So you want to make sure you know which direction things are flowing. And then you need to refine your catchment delineation. And then if available, show your municipal sewer, and if you have any combined sewer in your municipality, those would be helpful to have.
Phase 1 mapping is to be completed by the end of year 2. Phase 2 mapping is to be completed by the end of year 10.
So as part of the mapping, you've delineated your catchments to your outfalls. And then you'll need to assess those outfalls for the illicit discharge and sanitary sewer overflow potential. And then also relate that to the public health significance. And this assessment and priority ranking, it sets the priority order for your investigations. So you set this up first, and then it will kind of indicate and lead you on the way of doing your investigations. So the initial inventory is based on existing information that you have, and then you'll update it annually as you get more information from conducting your screenings and your catchment investigations. So they range in severity from the low end, or the high end is problem outfalls, followed by your highest and lowest priority outfalls, and then you have the special category of excluded outfalls. So these are the catchment categories that I just mentioned. So by looking at your catchment areas, then you'll rank them based on these characteristics. So you'll look at each individual catchment, and you'll look for the presence of these characteristics. So has there been any previous screening? Do you have results from outfalls that were screened that could help guide you to determine if these outfalls are high or low priority? Do you know of areas where you have complaints from the public? Poor receiving water quality. If you have high density of generating sites, so you know there's areas with, say, old infrastructure or that have septic systems, would that be an area that could potentially have a higher potential for an illicit discharge? If you have culverted streams or water quality limited water bodies, or simply the age of the development, or is this whole development new and is the system tight versus, oh, this is an older area that, we have leaky pipes, we have leaky storm sewers, they're in close proximity to they're built in the same trench right next to each other. These are all characteristics that you need to look at so that you can prioritize your outfalls. So the 4 different categories are problem outfalls. These are areas where you have suspected or illicit discharges, and the likely input is from sewer sources. So these are just like low-hanging fruit. You know them already. They get put into the problem outfalls. These don't need to be screened for dry weather because you already know that they're a problem. And then high priority outfalls, you kind of look, that the discharge is to an area of concern for public health, like to a beach or to a swimming area or drinking water supply. And so or you've done your characteristic ranking and you know that these are high potential. There's a good chance that there could be an illicit discharge. And then your low priority outfalls, you've done your ranking and they just have a low potential for an illicit discharge. And then there's this excluded outfalls. These have no potential for an illicit discharge, but they are limited to specific categories. So roadway drainage in undeveloped areas, athletic fields, parks and undeveloped green spaces, or cross-country drainage. There's just, there's no potential for an illicit discharge, so these get to the excluded outfalls. And this is a sample matrix that can help you figure out what the ranking will be and to put them into the different categories. Up here on this line is your information source. So where are you gathering the information that's going to help you determine these different categories? These are the ranking characteristics that were on the previous slide. And then this is the source of the data of where you're going to get your data. And then this is a example scoring criteria from 1 to 3 to determine the ranking. And this matrix is from that sample IDDE program from the Central Mass Coalition.
The initial outfall ranking is due by the end of year 1. The updated ranking is due by the end of year 3 and annually thereafter.
So what is an outfall? An outfall is the point where the MS4 discharges to the waters of the United States via a discrete conveyance. So it can be a pipe. You can have you have a line of catch basins running down the street. They tie off to an outfall right to the water body. That pipe there, that pipe opening is your outfall. Or like I mentioned, you can have those ditch outfalls, two ditches, running down either side of the road, you get to extreme crossing and those ditches discharge to the crossing. At that point, that is considered an outfall. So any point where a discrete conveyance discharges your water from your storm system into waters of the United States. But it does not include pipes that simply convey waters of the United States. If you have you have a stream that's culverted under your road, that section is not considered a outfall or an outfall. It can get messy figuring out what is an outfall. Like this picture, there are, I think, 4 pipes. It's hard to see because it's not the best quality photo, but there are, it looks like 4 pipes that are discharging into that little area. And here's the example of a ditch outfall. So we have the ditch line running down here. We got to a bridge, stream crossing. This would be your outfall. The permit also talks about interconnections. An interconnection is the point where your MS4 discharges into another MS4 or storm drain system. And it's that point from crossing over jurisdictions is where the interconnection is. In the permit, interconnections are considered an outfall. So it's not discharging directly to a water of the United States, but it's discharging into another MS4 that then makes its way to waters of the United States. So it could be at a ditch line where it crosses over from your municipality into another municipality, or it could be underground in a pipe system.
According to EPA, it is up to the permittee to determine whether outfalls they believe have a chance at discharging to a water body and are therefore going to be treated as a regulated outfall as part of their stormwater program management plan, no matter how far away from the end of the pipe.
So once you've developed your ranking, then you'll need to inspect, go out and do an outfall screening for all high and low priority outfalls and interconnections during dry weather. And then you conduct them in the order based on your ranking. We'll talk more about this in Module 3.
Written procedures for outfall and interconnection screening and sampling is required as part of the IDDE program, which needs to include procedures for sample collection, use of field kits, storage and conveyance of samples, including relevant hold times, and field data, collection and storage. An example screening and sampling protocol can be found on EPA's website. Refer to the references listed for Module 3 for a link to the example protocol. Dry weather outfall screening and sampling is to be completed during years 2 and 3, with wet weather screening occurring in years 3 through 10.
So catchment investigations. The purpose of a catchment investigation is to trace an illicit discharge to the source. And there are various techniques that you could use. You could review maps and plans, like historic records for the area. Can conduct manhole inspections and observations. Sampling, CTV inspections, and smoke and dye testing. So these are the field techniques to trace an illicit discharge to its source. And we'll talk more about this in Module 3.
Written and systematic procedures to investigate each catchment are due by the middle of year 2. Catchment investigations for problem outfalls and outfalls and interconnections where dry weather testing indicates sewer input are to be performed in years 3 through 7, with 100% of the problem outfalls in catchments with sewer evidence investigated by the end of year 7. Catchment investigations for the remaining outfalls are to be inspected in years 8 through 10, with 100% of the catchments investigated by the end of year 10.
So employee training, your IDDE program needs to include a training component for all employees who are involved in the program. So this could be, it's going to be more than just the people in this room. The training needs to include how to identify an illicit discharge in a SSO, and then you need to maintain the records, and this training will count for training for you, and in the future, you can use these videos to pass on to train additional people on the program. And then reporting. There's a lot of information that you are required to report on in your annual report. And then this is an extensive list, and it's a lot of information. So it will be key as part of your program to have a way to manage your data and to make sure that you're keeping records, you're tracking things, you're following up, and you have the documentation to prove that you're implementing your program.
Try to make the best use of the tools you have available to track and manage your data. If you have the means to collect the data in a digital format and to track it in a digital database, it is recommended.
So you'll need to include a progress on your mapping, all the inventories, the rankings, your data, your sampling results. You're going to need to report this to the EPA, or in your annual reports. And then at the end, it's just you need to do an evaluation of your IDDE program. What is your thoughts on it, and is it being effective?
The permit requires you to define or describe indicators for tracking program success and evaluate and report on the overall effectiveness of the IDDE program. At a minimum, to evaluate your IDDE program, you need to document the following in each annual report: the number of SSOs and illicit discharges identified and removed, the number and percent of total outfall catchments served by the MS4 evaluated using the catchment investigation procedure, all dry weather and wet weather screening and sampling results, and the volume of sewage removed. In summary, the following are links to resources referenced in Module 2.